Hey real estate nerds, this is Alex Yoder with Pro Tip Tuesday, my favorite day of the week, and today I want to talk to you about SB21-173. Yes, I did write that on my hand because I keep on forgetting the bill number. Basically, this bill was primarily addressing late fees and what landlords can charge on late fees and kind of how late fees in general are handled. I'm not going to talk about the whole bill. There's quite a bit covered in this bill, but if you go to the Colorado General Assembly website and type in that bill number, you'll be able to pull it up and read it for yourself, which I would advise if you haven't already done that as a landlord. However, what I wanted to touch on specifically was the grace period sort of that's effectively required before you can charge a late fee, because I feel like there's a lot of misunderstanding and confusion about how we should be handling this stuff. Now, I'll state now, and I've stated many times before, I am not an attorney, so please confirm what I'm saying with your attorney. But here is what we understand as individuals who are heavily involved in property management, but also who were actually at the table when this bill was being pushed through. So first of all, the bill limits the amount that you can charge on late fees to either $50 or 5% of the rent. You can do the greater of. That needs to be spelled out in your lease as to how you are handling that, and then you just kind of do that consistently. That hasn't been a point of confusion. The point of the confusion that I keep on mentioning here is kind of about that grace period before you can charge late fees. So first of all, let me just say that the day that you can charge late fees is not necessarily the same as the day that the rent is considered late. So as an example, your lease can say rent is due on the 1st and considered late on the 2nd, which is what most leases these days say. I know some of them have, the 5th or the 6th. So I'm not saying always, but most leases will say rent's due on the 1st and late on the 2nd. So you can post demand notices to initiate the potential eviction process if that's what you were needing to do. You can post those on the 2nd. Now, you can't charge late fees in the example of rent being due on the 1st until the 9th. So because you are required to give basically a 7-day grace period. The rent has to be late by 7 days. In the example that I just gave, that would be the 2nd through the 8th. So the 2nd through the 8th is your 7 days. Rent due on the 1st, late fees charged on the 9th. Again, that doesn't mean you can't start the eviction process sooner. With our company, we typically post demand notices around the 5th or the 6th, because what we find is that 90% of those people that hadn't paid on the 1st usually will pay on or by the 5th. So it may be a little confusing, and you may decide not to do it this way, but we actually are posting those demand notices before a late fee is even charged. Because, and our logic is that the process now for evicting somebody is pretty lengthy, and we don't want to wait around any longer than we really have to, within reason, to kind of get that timeline going in the event that somebody does not ever pay on that rent that's due. So that's the biggest point of confusion I keep on seeing in various not landlord groups, but in various online groups where property managers in some cases are even giving advice that is incorrect as it pertains to posting these notices and when late fees can be charged. So I want to make sure that was clarified. There are some other points in this bill, so I would recommend you read it, to include things like you can't charge late fees on late fees, which I think is a no-brainer, but I guess companies were doing that back in the day. You can't also evict just because of unpaid late fees, those kinds of things. So make sure you're reading that bill and or getting advice from your attorney. But otherwise, hopefully this was helpful as a brief recap of when these fees can be charged. We'll see you next week.